Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Russian and Ukrainian delegates have started a second round of direct peace talks, which have got underway in Istanbul. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz says he will push for a fair ceasefire when he speaks with President Trump, who said the US could walk away if both sides fail to compromise. Meanwhile, ahead of these peace talks in Turkey, Russia and Ukraine have exchanged heavy drone barrages, with Moscow claiming it downed 162 drones, while Kyiv reports strikes on 12 targets. These escalations come in the wake of Ukraine's Operation Spiderweb, which targeted Russian bombers deep into the country. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk has called for an independent investigation into an alleged Israeli military attack on an aid facility near Rafah in Gaza. Israel has denied reports that dozens were killed after civilians were fired at. Meanwhile, 8 people have been injured after a man shouting "Free Palestine" threw firebombs into a crowd at a pro-Israel event in Colorado. The FBI labels it as a targeted act of terror following a recent fatal shooting of 2 Israeli embassy staff in Washington. China has accused the United States of severely violating their trade truce, saying it will take the strongest measures to defend its interests. A 110% reduction in reciprocal tariffs between the nations was agreed in Geneva, though Trump has also accused China of violations. Iran has pressed the United States to guarantee sanctions will be lifted as a condition of any nuclear deal between the nations. Meanwhile, Iran says it is drafting a negative response to a White House proposal after several rounds of discussions and military threats from Donald Trump. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says that every citizen has a role to play in making the country battle-ready as he launches the Strategic Defence Review in Glasgow. Starmer says the UK faces a more serious, more immediate threat, with 12 new attack submarines to be built. Hungary's Viktor Orban has hailed Karol Nawrocki's fantastic victory in Poland's presidential runoff, while the EU and Germany offer congratulations and call for cooperation. The win by the nationalist candidate marks a potential shift in Poland's future role within the EU. We start off this hour as a second round of peace talks between Ukrainian and Russian delegations have started in Turkey. Russian and Ukrainian staff arrived at Istanbul's Kirigan Palace for a new round of direct peace talks aimed at ending the war, which has raged on for more than 3 years. Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov is leading Kyiv's delegation, while Russia's side is headed by Vladimir Medinsky. Medinsky currently serves as an aide to Putin. Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan is overseeing the talks. Ahead of the meeting, Fidan stressed that American support for the peace talks was extremely important. The talks come just a day after Ukraine launched Operation Spiderweb, an audacious drone offensive deep into Russian territory, which targeted multiple air bases and damaged up to 40 strategic Russian bombers. Meanwhile, speaking at the NATO Eastern Flank Summit, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called for new sanctions against Russia. He also stated that Ukraine was willing to take necessary steps for peace. Let's take a listen.
And if Russia undermines even this initial agenda, and if the Istanbul meeting brings nothing, that clearly means strong new sanctions are urgently needed from the EU's 18th package and from the United States. Specifically, the strongest sanctions President Trump promised. Sanctions should hit Russian energy, especially oil and tankers, price caps, of course, and also Russian banks and the financial.
Президент Ердоган висловив повну готовність прийняти зустріч. Важливо, що президент Трамп повністю підтримує зустріч. І ми б хотіли, щоб він знайшов можливість бути в Туреччині. Було також сьогодні дуже багато роботи з нашими партнерами, з американцями, з європейцями, дипломатична робота.
Well, ahead of the talks, Ukraine's delegation also held meetings with officials from Germany, Italy and the United Kingdom to coordinate positions. This is the second round of talks being held in Istanbul. The previous session last month resulted in a large-scale prisoner exchange but failed to produce a lasting ceasefire or any other major breakthrough towards ending the war. Well, these visuals that we're seeing from discussions that are set to continue over the next coming hours. Of course, this is the second round of talks following the first direct Ukraine-Russia talks on the 16th of May for over 3 years. There has been diplomatic pressure from major nations for a compromise to be reached and a ceasefire of 30 days to be struck, leading to the opportunity for further peace talks and a lasting ceasefire. This in the wake of further action, strikes recorded and reported by both Russia and Ukraine overnight following Operation Spiderweb, which saw a long-range drone strike deep within Russian territory, potentially up to 40 Russian bombers, totaling billions of dollars in costs. The impact, of course, will be felt and could have an impact on these discussions. We will bring you all of those updates from the talks as we get them. Moving on now, in the latest development, Gaza's civil defence says an Israeli strike hit the al-Bursh family home in Jabalia, killing 14 people, including 6 children and 3 women. Spokesman Mahmoud Basal reported that over 20 others remain missing under the rubble. The attack occurred today amid ongoing Israeli military operations in northern Gaza. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for an immediate independent probe into the deaths of at least 31 Palestinians near a US-backed aid site in Gaza. Rescuers blame Israeli gunfire. Guterres says it's unacceptable that people are risking their lives for food and demanded accountability for the incident. This comes as Gaza's civil defence says at least 31 people were killed and over 170 injured on Sunday after Israeli fire targeted crowds near a US-backed aid distribution site. But both the Israeli military and the organisation overseeing the aid operations have denied that any such attack took place. The US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation says it has distributed millions of meals since launching operations, but aid delivery has been chaotic with limited disruption, centres struggling to meet demand. Hamas has signalled its readiness to resume indirect talks on a truce as Qatar and Egypt intensify mediation efforts. The proposed plan includes a 60-day ceasefire, increased humanitarian access and the reopening of border crossings. As diplomatic pressure builds, US Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee mocked France's support for Palestinian statehood, suggesting it should carve out a piece of the French Riviera instead. Meanwhile, World Food Programme Chief Cindy McCain urged Israel to grant full access to Gaza, calling for an immediate ceasefire and opening gates to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe. Well, joining us to discuss these developments is Ahmed Fatu, a spokesperson for the Fatah movement, who's joining us from Ramallah. Thank you ever so much, Ahmed, for being here with us. Let's first look at the ongoing military action that we're seeing in Gaza, some disputed, but I want to look at these 14 people that have died in an attack on a home today first. What is the consensus amongst Palestinians given the renewed attacks and continuation of worrying humanitarian conditions on the ground?
Thank you for having me. Well, the situation, as you have seen, as reported by everyone, is catastrophic. It's a major tragedy going on for the past 20 months. Children are suffering, women, elders, all are suffering, and it is astonishing that this is still continuing despite all the evidence. We have all the reports, all the outcries by everyone, by the Gazans calling for help to the entire world, yet they are not receiving it. Of course, what Israel is claiming is false. They're denying the fact that they have killed 32 Palestinians yesterday was heavily reported by everyone, by witnesses on the ground, by the Red Crescent, which is not led by Hamas, but by the PLO, the legitimate authority, by a human rights organization like Euromed, and by many hospitals. And I can't. The images is just there. I can't understand how they deny it and why they are considered as anything legitimate to be a credible source. This is a grotesque war crime, a chilling testament of Israel's use of starvation as a sadistic way to increase the suffering of Palestinians. For what? 20 months of wars. The entire world is calling for this war to end. But two states only are refusing to stop this genocide, which is the United States and the perpetrator, Israel. We need to stop this immediately. The world needs to stop this. This is a catastrophic humanitarian situation. Today, as you have reported, tens has been killed. Every day, civilians are getting killed. 40, 50, 60, 100. For how long is this going to continue? 2 million population. They are not responsible for the October 7. This is a collective punishment. This is a war crime. Starvation is refused under Geneva Convention. This is a major war crime. 1 million children are suffering today. Women, pregnant women, are losing their pregnancy because of malnutrition and all these diseases that are killing people that are simply resolved and healed if the medicine exists, but medicine is not there to heal them. This is a crisis that the world needs to pay major attention and stop it immediately. It cannot continue.
Ahmed, let's now look back a short while. Reports of Israeli fire on civilians who were at an aid facility. This has, of course, been reported, but Israel and the organisation that are providing this aid say that there was no disruption. We've heard the UN chief calling now for an independent investigation. What have you heard on the ground about this reported incident?
Well, as you have witnessed yesterday, hundreds of witnesses on ground said that they have opened fire on us. Israeli quadcopters opened fire on aid seekers. This is undeniable. Journalists, tens of journalists have reported it. As I told you, humanitarian organization reported hospitals has received many dead bodies from this area. The videos that Israel, by the way, provided is from Khan Yunis. It's not from west of Rafah. It is a clear lie, and we can't take the perpetrator as a witness. We have the witness. The people are saying it. The humanitarian organization, and as the UN chief said, let's an investigation come in. What is needed now is an immediate ceasefire and a global intervention to stop this genocide, and for an international investigation team to come to Palestine and investigate all these matters, whether from the side of Hamas or from the side of Israel. That's number one. Number two, it's needed for an immediate protection mechanism for the Palestinian people. We cannot continue under this regime that has proved to everyone that it cares not about the Palestinian people, it cares not about the two-state solution, it cares not about peace. When we have the entire globe is against the continuation of war, yet it continues this war. That means that Israel has become a rogue state who does not see the Palestinian people as equal human beings. They are seeing us as subhuman beings. What they are doing in the West Bank, where I live right now, is also catastrophic. Extermination of our indigenous lands. Where are we going from this? We cannot, the right, the far right, the fascist far right of Israel are trying to remake the 1948 Nakba before our eyes. The world needs to stop this. In the Nakba 1948, they expelled 750,000 Palestinians from their indigenous land to create the state of Israel. Now they want to remove the rest of the Palestinians to create the greater Israel. They have said it. I'm not saying this. This is not conspiracy theory. This is the finance minister who said it. Smotrich, Ben Gavir, the Ministry of Security said it. Netanyahu said it. What more evidence is needed for the world to act? We have the resolution, more than 1,000 resolution, speaking about the resolving the question of Palestine. Israel refused to apply them. Two-state solution is here. We have to think clearly, because what is needed now is a comprehensive political solution. The war cannot continue. This is a huge toll of human casualties. Where are we going from this? Immediate intervention to the war, immediate protection for the Palestinian people, and to go for a two-state solution. This is the only resolution for this catastrophic situation. Israel cannot run away from these facts. They cannot deny the existence of the Palestinian people. They cannot deny the existence, our natural right of self-determination. That's,
Ahmed,
most straightforward facts.
Let's move forward now, and let's take a look at this Steve Witkoff proposal, of course agreed by Israel, which would see a 60-day pause in military action from Israel in the Gaza Strip. Hamas said no, have given their own counter-proposal, which is almost identical but includes guarantees. Is there not some responsibility on Hamas to just get a deal agreed to end the fighting, improve the humanitarian situation, and provide a 2-month window to potentially agree a permanent ceasefire in the region?
Well, right now we are suffering immensely from this tragic war and this tragic genocide. I'm aware that Witkoff proposal is unfair, is not really give any guarantees for stopping the war. Hamas made mistake by not involving the Palestinian Liberation Organization in these negotiations, and they continue in their divisive mentalities as a political party that refused to include the Palestinian national factions. That is a mistake that Hamas has done, and I call on Hamas to think clearly that this is a matter of national crisis. This is not a matter of Hamas, and all Palestinian factions under the umbrella of PLO need to be involved immediately to stop this catastrophic situation. Now, Hamas also has to call and declare that the Palestinian Authority, the legitimate authority, should come back to Gaza and step down from power. Together we can manage these negotiations to go out from this catastrophe, but it also requires a fair position from the United States, because the United States has shown that they have no fairness in this situation. They are pressuring on the Hamas side by using an illegal methods of war, by allowing Israel to starve the Palestinian population. In any case, this method is also going to lead to nowhere, because, as I told you, without touching the major political issues, we are going to be to enter an endless cycle of wars, an endless cycle of conflict. It's already have been 77 years and the Palestinians did not receive their independence. Where are the Zionist movement thinking that they will lead this situation to? More 77 years of a struggle? It is not going to end by a crazy idea of mass expulsion to the Palestinian people, because we are witnessing right now a crime before our eyes. This Gaza Humanitarian Foundation aim is to move the Palestinian people from the north to the south and use starvation as a way to expel the Palestinians from their lands. It's pretty obvious, and the United States is involved in this. They need to be aware that they are involved in a major crime that history will not forgive, and the entire world is against it. Now the entire globe is calling for ending this genocide, for ending this war crime, and let's go to an international conference for peace and discuss everything. Hamas has expressed that they would step down from power. Hamas also has expressed that they are willing to negotiate to submitting their weapons to the Palestinian Authority. So the security matters, we can discuss it in a peaceful manner, but not in a way under the gun and under the fire, under the massacres. That is crazy.
Ahmed, I do want to provide some balance there. We have heard from US leaders within the Trump administration, including Donald Trump himself, that conversations were had between the US and Israel over aid and the importance of aid being distributed within Gaza amid a worsening humanitarian situation. But on the flip side, we have seen comments recently from the US administration, notably Mike Huckabee, who is the envoy to Israel, mocking France over a two-state solution. It's something that you've raised before, but I do want to explore this further. A divide between two historical Western allies. What message does that send about the the sort of wider geopolitical stance on the current situation in Gaza?
What Huckabee has said is very racist, is very biased, and that is a testament for the major issue that the Palestinian people are suffering since the beginning of this struggle, and that is the United States bias toward Israel and negligence of the Palestinian rights to self-determination. Huckabee telling France to take Palestinians, this is a call for ethnic cleansing coming out from an ambassador representing the United States. That is catastrophic. The United States need to realize that they are heading into a very dark future. Where are we going with this when a genocide is allowed before our eyes, when starvation is being and aid is being distributed by mercenaries? This is a new phase of fascism. The world needs to pay attention. United States need to realize that the solution resides on the two-state solution. The entire region has said clearly there will be no Abraham records, no more Abraham agreements without the application of Palestinian right of self-determination, and that is by their independent state on the 1967 borders. United States need to be fair in this manner. The entire world is saying and standing up. The voice from Europe is very loud. Now we are heading to a two-state solution conference in New York, co-chaired by France and Saudi Arabia. I really hope that the United States would go and participate in that conference and look clearly that the children suffering in Palestine are not of a lesser God, are not of a lesser human being. We are all human beings, we are all equal, and I'm astounded the United States.
Ahmed, unfortunately, I apologise to cut you off there. We are out of time, but thank you ever so much for joining us and providing that insight. We will, of course, be across all the developments going on in Gaza and as discussions towards peace continue. We move on, though, now, and China has hit back at President Donald Trump's latest trade accusations. Today, Beijing called his claims groundless and warned of forceful countermeasures. Trump accused China of breaking a deal made last month in Geneva, a deal that included a 90-day pause on tariffs and an end to export restrictions on critical metals. But China's Commerce Ministry says it's the US that has breached the agreement by imposing new export controls on AI chips, blocking chip software sales and cancelling visas for Chinese students. Beijing say these moves have increased uncertainty in trade ties and blames Washington for repeatedly triggering friction. Meanwhile, Trump has announced a tariff hike, doubling duties on steel and aluminium to 50%. China, the world's biggest steel producer, exports very little to the US due to earlier tariffs, with tensions high on both sides. The Geneva trade truce is now under severe strain. Several updates there. Joining us to discuss them is Andrew KP Leong, a China strategist, who's joining us from Hong Kong. Andrew, as always, thank you ever so much for joining us. We have somewhat of a blame game here. Trump says that China has violated this Geneva agreement. China turns around and says, no, the US have done something similar and have violated it themselves. How strained really are relations between US and China currently, and how do we see them moving forward?
I think that this is another manifestation of the United States mindset that somehow they can use coercion and suppression on the one hand, and on the other hand, saying that they want a deal. This is the stance is representative what they're doing over Gaza, over Ukraine, and now in the relationship with China. Both sides agree initially on a 90-day rollback, but after the Trump administration upped the ante to pushing these tariffs to unprecedented levels, including everything, amount to 245%, that would be totally ridiculous, because no trade could take place for any number even near that high tariffs. With the result that both sides agreed just a 90-day pause. But then while this is going on, the United States is imposing restrictions on China's AI chips, and then also applied restrictive measures for China access to chip design facilities, also restricting Chinese student visas. So on the one hand, it's just like a dance, a tango, and both sides want to tangle, but the United States partner seems to be, while dancing, using another hand to stab China in the back. This only reflects a kind of schizophrenic kind of mindset in trade or diplomatic negotiations. That you just can't just focus on a few points on the one side and expect to have an agreement, while on the other hand, upping the ante on confrontation, humiliation, and also suppression. So I think that the China mindset has always been holistic. Again, this reflective of a Western and China difference between the two mindsets. China's mindset has always been, through the centuries, holistic. In other words, you just can't separate one from the other. China does not buy into a kind of two-faced kind of relationship. But this is what's happening now. But I think that the two sides simply lack mutual trust.
Yes.
And then Trump's minions, his foreign secretary of state, his national security advisor, his trade secretary, and so on, they all want to be politically correct, and they just push the envelope further and further on the American agenda without regard to the total relationship, which is now what's happening. I think at the end of the day, as suggested even by Americans' Treasury Secretary, that it would really take the two leaders to speak to one another, to really set the tone and the steps forward for a more constructive relationship. Not to solve all the problems, perhaps, but at least mapping a realistic roadmap so that both sides can stick on the right path.
Yes.
And not walking with two legs, walking in different directions, as it were.
Andrew, let's look. We've just taken a thought about how this could be resolved. I want to look at the comments specifically from China today, saying a severe violation and severe violations have taken place. Also vowing to take the strongest measures to defend its interest. Strong rhetoric there from China. What do you think that could mean to not just this agreement that was made in Geneva, but future relations between the US and China, maybe not just on trade?
Well, I think the Beijing already made it quite clear when before this agreement was reached on a 90-day pause, when the Trump administration upped the ante, pushing the tariffs to 245%. I think that President Xi already made it quite clear that China is not going to succumb, not going to play the role of an applicant. China would be determined to fight to the very end, or to the bitter end if necessary. And then China would not respond further for any kind of further upping the ante on numbers. So China's position has been very consistent. And no matter what the kind of pressure, China will fight back. And China's most effective weapon fighting back is the rare earths, because that's the reason why when President Trump went back to the White House for his second term, the first thing he wanted was Greenland for his rare earth resources, and to a certain extent Canada. And he wanted the rare earths in Ukraine. Why all this sudden madness about rare earths? If not that represented United States Achilles heel, because even though with the rare earths, the 90% of the processing very complicated, depending on which particular element you're talking about, which product you're talking about. All these processes have been developed by China over decades, and very complicated, very polluting. There is no way that the United States can reverse the situation anytime soon. So I think that the American administration, rather than just playing along this one track mind, needs to take a more holistic assessment of the situation and
Yes.
come up with not only the art of the deal based on Americans' coercion and aggression, but also the art of compromise, because any deal must be based on compromise. So without compromise, it's just a one-sided kind of win for one party, and then coffering and submission to the other side. This simply won't work.